Security expert Will Geddes.
And CEO of the International Corporate Protection Group.
The real-life James Bond.
What is the most controversial situation you've been called in to handle?
He was a QC who had a bit of a penchant for transsexuals, decided to take lots of recreational drugs, and they live streamed their shenanigans to a third party who recorded the whole thing and then blackmailed them. Nothing shocks me now, Ellie. We may end up breaking jewelry, wrists, ribs, whatever, in the process of protecting you. And I have had occasions where I'll grab them by the neck. Celebrities who've had the most horrendous threats made against them by random people. I've gone and met those people. Here's the controversial thing. You're not going to hate me for this.
Will Geddes, welcome to the On a Mission podcast.
I am so privileged, Ellie. I've watched so many of yours, and I have to say you've had some really astounding guests. And I think, as I've probably mentioned on other podcasts, that I get asked to do them a lot, and there are very few that I really want to do because, you know, you as a subject are only as good as your interviewer, and I've seen you. I've seen you in the nicest way dismantle people. So I'm looking forward to the challenge.
Oh my goodness, dismantle, right?
In a lovely way. You
know what? That's very high praise indeed. I do really appreciate that because the podcast is very much about the guests and not with me. But all my favourite podcasters that I listen to, it's about facilitating the space. And maybe this sounds a bit woo-woo, and I didn't intend it to sound woo-woo, but providing the right energy to just allow the guest or the subject to feel comfortable elaborating on their story and knowing when to listen rather than to talk, which is actually, believe it or not, quite challenging for me.
It's a super skill. But it's a super skill for everybody. But it's it's like everything in life. It's about chemistry. One of the real fundamentals that I talk to everybody about, particularly when it comes to personal security and risk assessing and that sort of thing, is about your gut feeling. And if you have the wrong gut feeling, for whatever reason it might be, then the chemistry is not going to work. I'm kind of anxious about today's podcast. So I have no idea what you're going to throw at me in your book there.
Well, it's interesting. I just mentioned to you, I have, more of a security blanket. I always have my notepad at the side of me. But if you've watched any of my stuff on video format, you'll see I never ever look at what's on my notepad. And I very rarely ask any of the questions or go down the avenues I was originally intending on. And the reason I say that is straight away, you just mentioned there about energy. Before we get into anything else, I know from listening to your previous interviews that you've been in situations before where you've had potentially very high paid clients and you have refused to work with them in the nicest and most professional manner. And we've done exactly the same thing. And a lot of people talk the talk about knowing your worth, values, being treated with respect. But then when the shiny penny sticks its head above the parapet, their values tend to go out the window, whereas you genuinely will say no to someone if you don't think they're a right fit.
And you know why? I think it's been the fact that I've taken that path, and maybe I'm a few years older than most people, and I've
not
learned.
Most people.
I am feeling it this morning, Ellie. No, I'm not. I think it's because you can find yourself. It's like that definition of insanity, to continue to do the same thing and expect a different result. Instinctively, or you learn over time. Particularly in my world, you learn over time to listen to that instinct and say, look, why am I pushing against it? Why am I bucking against it? We've had it since our evolution, since we were in caves fighting saber-toothed tigers and we had very little else to rely on. But it's like if you walk into a room at a party and you see someone you've never met before, never seen before, and you get that instinctive feeling, I'm going to get on well with them. And you go over and you talk to them and you find out that you do. Or in reverse, you walk into a room at a party and you see someone you've never met before, but you get that feeling, I'm just not going to get on well with them. And more often than not, you sit next to them at dinner, and as hard as you try, it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
And I think it's down to the fact that you've got to actually listen to yourself and say, look, how hard do I need to push it? And that's not to say early on in my career that I worked with people that I detested and I didn't actually like. I won't name names. But I had to pay, but I had to, because I had to pay the bills. So, we will have to sometimes force that situation. But in relationships, it's so key, in our personal relationships, whether that be intimate, romantic, or friends. Don't try and force a square peg into a round hole, because, to be honest, you're probably both doing it. And where's it going to end up? Nobody happy.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's interesting that you talk about intuition and listening to that gut feeling. You mentioned that people have been doing that since the dawn of time, but you had quite a challenging start to life where you were in quite volatile situations, which I'd like you to elaborate on if you wouldn't mind, Will, because basically what I want to know is whether your upbringing
Mm.
provided you with the skills to be able to pick up on potentially dangerous situations, to be able to read rooms, and some of the skills from a young age that you now use as part of your daily practice,
Yeah.
or that was something that you feel that we've all got within us that perhaps we don't always listen to.
I do think it's nurture rather than nature. I do believe that we are shaped by our experiences, and that will shape us in positive and negative ways. I had and I think, I've mentioned it on other podcasts, I had a pretty traumatic childhood. I had very abusive parents. I had a very alcoholic mother who basically was, physically abusive. And you learn a survival skill. And I've spoken to other, people, friends who've come through similar childhoods, and you learn survival skill to read the room super quick. Because certainly with alcohol or someone who's under some sort of substance abuse, the volatility can be instantaneous. It's like a little dog. 1 minute you can stroke it, or a cat, lick, lick, bite. It can change in 2 seconds. So you learn to adapt and read very quickly and try and preempt what is going to happen with that person. And that inherently has been, I look back at my childhood and go, oh my God, I wouldn't want to go through that. And I wouldn't want anyone else to go through it. But I think it's been such an amazingly useful tool that I've developed. And that, and it doesn't necessarily mean in a security perspective. Obviously, if you're in a threat situation, it can be very, very helpful. But I think also where it's incredibly helpful is with friends. And, we were talking earlier, and you were mentioning earlier about sort of listening rather than talking.
So
We do
hard.
have 2 of these, and we have got one of these. And but we all do. We all have a real difficulty sometimes just sitting back. And I put something actually on my Instagram the other day, which I heard, which I thought was so good, that we as guys, and particularly also from my childhood, are all about fixing things. You want to fix things. And we drive you women absolutely insane, because you may come home and say, darling, I've had the most crappy, shitty day, and this and that has happened. And we're already going, right, this is how we're going to fix it. Da, 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 da. And you don't want us to do that. So, I put something up the other day which resonated obviously with a lot of people, and particularly women, who came back and said, I wish my other half would do that. And it was to ask, do you want comfort or solutions? Because sometimes you want both, but sometimes you just want the man in your life to actually listen. And I have this with clients as well. Again, you get brought in, it's a blackmail, it's a kidnapping, it's something that's made their world go incredibly dark. And I used to be too quick off the mark to go, right, this is what we're going to do. We're going to fix this. When really you need to just sit quietly, just listen, let them download, let them give you all the problems and issues, and just go, don't worry, we're going to fix it.
I know that this is a completely different context, but I was kind of smiling as you were saying that, because when I started to get into self-development, started to take accountability for my own life, started educating myself, instilling a bit more discipline into my daily routine, I found that my friendship groups changed somewhat, because it's that whole thing. Not this is maybe a bit harsh, but misery likes company.
Yeah.
And prior to that, I was the world's biggest victim. I could sit and spend hours telling you about my traumatic childhood, or all the reasons in life why I'm not a multimillionaire and this person is, or the reason that I'm overweight, or any of this kind of thing. And the more I started implementing what I was learning and started seeing positive changes in my own life, the more it repelled certain people. And I've got to take some ownership for that, because if somebody was sitting there for the 20th time within that month telling me how much they hated their job, what I realized very quickly is they don't necessarily want the advice. They just want to rant and to offload and just to get it out, basically. But there definitely was a disconnect, because I got to a point where I realized that my advice was actually, they didn't want to hear that actually you don't have to stay in that dead end job. You do actually have options. But because they had no intention of making the changes and they just wanted to run, and I just got to the point where I didn't want to listen anymore, then things really change. What I realised when somebody tells you that they're fed up as they're popping antidepressants, drinking a bottle of wine a night and eating pizza, they don't want you to tell them to go and exercise and to jump in an ice bath and get off the medication and stop fucking about with their life and man up for all intents and purposes.
You know, I couldn't agree more. And but also the one thing that worries me about society now is the complete deterioration of hardship.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the removal of the fact that we need to go through hardship. We need to be carved out of stone. We need to be shaped into the people, the warriors, and the warriors collectively, all genders apply.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we need to hear the stuff we don't want to hear. And I'll give you one example, and I love this one. I have to train regularly because, I was a fat, chubby kid.
Were you?
Oh, yeah.
I need to see some
I can
photos.
send you pictures.
Yes, please.
Thankfully, I won't. And because I grew up on Spam and alphabeti spaghetti and God knows whatever else in the 70s. And so I've always had a problem with my weight. So I have to train hard. I'm carrying a bit more than I would probably like, a bit more timber than I'd like right now. And then you go back to something I did for Unilad during the pandemic, where I was interviewed about being a bodyguard. And I was super skinny and my arms looked like, twiglets. And, I had all the ex-paras going, get in the gym, mate, and all this business. But I was, at one time, I allowed myself to get really quite chubby. And there was a guy at my gym who I didn't really know. I'd see him occasionally, but we'd never been out for a drink. We never shared a coffee, but we'd say hi. And he turned around and said, Will, you look fucking fat. And you know what? As crushing as that was, and I went, oh, shit. Yeah. It was the best thing I could have heard because I literally walked away. And to this day, I turned around to him and said, you know what? I needed to hear that.
Yeah.
As sharp as a blade that went into me, I needed to hear that. And thank you very, very much. And he dies, of embarrassment now. And he goes, oh my God, I didn't really mean to say that. And I said, no, I'm so pleased you did.
Because that was life-changing for you. And we've got to question what is real friendship or a real relationship. It's not telling somebody what they want to hear. It's not enabling toxic behavior. But obviously you are going to alienate a lot of people. And when I say, I'll get lambasted for that, you've got to man up, that's not me being dismissive of mental health problems. That's me having openly admitted to having suicidal thoughts in the past, being on pharmaceutical antidepressants and anti-anxiety tablets for years and years and years that just continued to exasperate the situation. This is me that's been overweight, that doesn't particularly like exercising. This is me that's been at rock bottom more times than I've had hot dinners and had to crawl my way out of these situations. And it's not bloody easy, but I just think that we're almost in a time of entitlement where it is like that old saying, isn't it? People want the baby without the bathwater. And when people see where I am now compared to 5 years ago when I was on job seekers allowance and they say, what did you do? I'm like, you're not going to like the answer. You want me to tell you I went on a 2-day course, changed my life, 5 steps to success, done within 7 days. And, all of a sudden I'm some sort of ultra happy multimillionaire. It's like, you don't go from being suicidal and not being able to leave the house to being able to confidently talk on stage in front of hundreds of people without putting yourself through a process. And that's exactly what you've done.
Absolutely. I mean, I was thrown out of home. I was 17 at the time, got thrown out of home, lived on the streets for a short while, then lived in a squat. I had, I think I mentioned, I had this horrendous job where I was getting paid 50 quid a week.
Oh, double glazing, wasn't it? 'Cause I did that. I did door-to-door double glazing.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And literally I was 50 quid a week. 30 quid a week had to go on the squat that I was in, which got burgled and all my possessions got nicked anyway. I had 10 quid for my travel pass to get to the job. And I lived on £10.
Wow.
£10 a week. And that 10 quid, okay, this is a few years back, so it probably went a little further than it would today, which would be probably, one Starbucks or something. But I remember I had a bottle that back in those days, you'd put loads of 2p's or all your change in it. And I looked at it and literally that was my worth. That was all I had in the world. And I looked at this thing and went, fuck. What are my options? Do I just go and jump in the Thames? I've got this shitty dead-end job, I'm living in this shitty dead end place. I've got no friends. My family have kicked me out. What do I do? And you just have to pull yourself up by the bootstraps. And I don't think kids these days are given that opportunity. It's all this participation prizes. It's like, if you don't come second, you've participated, you won, yay.
Can I just say, my husband and I are on the same page with this. But
Yeah.
on sports days when the kids get like a proper certificate, we're like really excited for them. And obviously we support our children as long as they do their best. That's all we ever expect of them.
Yeah.
However, when they get their participation certificate, I just scrunch
tear
it
it
into a ball. I'm just like, I'm
Brilliant.
sorry.
I love that. And it's like, that's what I think of your participation prize. I genuinely think that. And you know what? Here's the controversial thing. You're going to hate me for this. I actually think bullying is a good thing.
Oh my goodness.
In measure. I think physical bullying is not a good idea. I think driving someone physically through bullying is a good thing. I think delivering hardships, building psychological strength. I was told as a child I was lazy, consistently by my father. He just said, you're a lazy little shit and you'll never amount to anything. My school reports were abominations. And it was always Will's looking out the window, in cloud cuckoo land. And I constantly believed that I was lazy. I work so hard now. And I started literally pushing against that tide and going, you know what? Everyone thinks I'm lazy. He thinks I'm lazy. Am I lazy? No, I'm not. I've got to do something. And either that or you fold. And if you fold, that's it. You're never coming back from that. Or if you fold too much, you're never coming back from that. Everybody needs a kick up the arse. I do. Everybody does. And I think sometimes we need to hear those hardships. And that's why when I say bullying, I use it in a loose term. I think, physical picking on other kids. I'm such, I was bullied as a kid, because I was a fat one, I couldn't run away.
Captured audience.
I know, I was slow, too slow. That's why I tried to get fit and do ultra marathons and things like that.
It's really interesting. I had quite a similar upbringing. I had quite a volatile relationship with my parents. They were in the process of going bankrupt themselves, getting divorced, both having mental breakdowns in their own right. My sister, diagnosed with bipolar, not really sure how I feel about her diagnosis, but she was getting sectioned constantly. And at the same time, I was getting bullied quite badly at school. We had like a brick going through the family house window, got put in hospital.
That's not the kind of bullying I'm talking about, yeah.
No, but I mean, it's probably a bit more extreme. I got my nose broken. But I just remember the sort of making excuses, the fear of the bell going at the end of the day, not so much for the physical things, but the embarrassment of being so unpopular and picked on and trying to come up with excuses to leave class 5-10 minutes before everyone else. And when I look back on that, as much as I don't regret anything that's ever happened in my life because I'm someone who will always take the positives and take the learnings. I want to do that. One of the reasons I want to do that is so I can protect my own children from having to endure what I endured and learn all my life lessons along the way. But it does present a different set of problems. Like we're moving to Dubai in August, as you know.
Yeah.
Like there's zero crime.
Yeah.
They have a 0 billion policy as well at their schools. It's such a utopian life that it's almost, it is going to be the reality, but it's almost a false reality.
Yeah, which is worrying. But then again, your kids thankfully have, strong parents like you and your partner. And those kids have that chance of survival because the biggest fear is that I think for children, and I've written books about, safety online for kids. I'm a strong anti-bullying advocate. So I don't want to be misunderstood what I'm talking about. What I'm saying is I think kids need to be pushed hard. They need to hear the realities of life. They need to be prepared that everybody out there is shit. Don't trust anybody. I know that sounds horrible and it sounds very pessimistic, but it's true. Whenever I was with a client yesterday and they've got a huge amount of problems going on. And there's potential people within their own camp who are leaking information to various groups. And I said, don't trust anybody. First and foremost, don't trust anybody. And the one thing I've learned over time is that you cannot trust anybody. You can give them a little degree of trust, but everybody has a little dark corner in their world, which nobody knows about. nobody knows about, even your best friends in the world. I mean, my two best friends, they probably know me better than most people, and they know where some of the bodies are buried. But the vast majority of people out there you can't trust. And I think for kids, they've got to learn that. They've got to learn, because otherwise, what are you doing for those kids? How are you preparing them? How are you protecting them in the longer term? Because they're going to come out and they're literally going to be blindsided by the people out there. And having protected people against stalkers, against blackmailers, against all sorts, the one thing that I can say, and I was saying this to someone the other day, is there is irrationality in life. There are people out there who will hate on people for no reason. We could sit down, we could try and fathom it, we could try and analyze it, we could try and break it down, but even they wouldn't be able to figure out why they have that inherent hate of that one person. I've had, celebrities who've had the most horrendous threats made against them by random people. I've gone and met those people and sat down and said, what is going on? What did they do? How did they, I just want to understand this. And they go, I don't know, I just don't like that person.
I've had death threats.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it can
me
be
too, I know.
a little bit
mine
more,
were usually
right?
justified, though.
But, it's crazy. And I think there's an almost acceptance if you put yourself out there that you have to be willing to shoulder some level of abuse back. And I don't think I necessarily agree with that. But it's interesting what you were saying here, Will, because I know that you don't like people saying this, but you are dubbed as the real life James Bond, aren't you? That's and also
I don't know why. Maybe Daniel Craig's dad.
Daniel Craig's dad. Well, Daniel Craig's
Actually, he's not that far younger than me, to be fair.
Yeah, I was going to say he's in his 50s now, isn't he?
He's a nice guy too, and I have to say, when you meet him for real, he's got the most cobalt eyes. I mean, ridiculously blue eyes. I have to say, I've never really gone for the other side, but
You're going. You know what? He, in my humble opinion, was definitely the best James Bond.
Yeah.
But you work with a lot of high-profile people, not just your A-list celebrities, although I know you've worked with plenty of those, but you've worked with leaders of countries. You run the security on such a huge level, and your knowledge is second to none. But with regards to that specific point then around children and the advice that you give out through your book and just through the services that you provide, what advice would you give myself and other parents in terms of, like, I have a 10-year-old, for example. She's not allowed on TikTok or anything like that.
That's a good start.
I personally really don't agree with that. I've also kept my children, it's not been an intentional thing. I think it's been more subconscious, away from ever watching music videos and things, because I personally feel that they are very sexually explicit, even when you look at people like Little Mix or Sugar Babes. This is probably showing how out of date my stuff is, 'cause I don't even know what's in the charts at the minute.
Yeah, me too.
And by the way, I like both of those bands. I think they're amazing. But actually, their videos are quite raunchy and laced with innuendo, which I don't want a 5 or a 6-year-old or even my 10-year-old to be seeing. So again, I think I've created this very safe little bubble for my 10-year-old. But as she goes into secondary school, we've not even had the chat about sex. How do you then sort of start talking about paedophiles? We have spoke about security, and one of the things that we've done from a young age with her, my eldest, is start her with martial arts. My husband's a black belt, so that she can protect herself as much as a child can in any potentially dangerous situation. But how much information should we give? And by withholding some information, is that actually counterproductive sometimes?
Okay, so there's a yes and a no to both of that.
Okay.
So there you go.
This is just a coaching session for me.
Sorted. Okay, so here was the irony. So when very large publishers, Dorling Kinsley, came to me and said, Will, could you write this book? And it's called Parents Alert, How to Keep Your Kids Safe Online. I thought, there's got to be a million books out there like this. And they went, no, there aren't. There are no books actually for parents in how to basically help their kids. I said, okay, so what ages are we covering? They said 7 to 17. And I went, you kidding me? And they went, no, 7 to 17, please. And I went, well, for starters, 7 to 13 is going to be about best practice. 13 to 17 is going to be about crisis management, because from 13 to 17, they will have overtaken their parents in their capability and what they can do. The issue with kids, and the thing with yours, is as much as you can cotton wool them, protect them, be the best parent you possibly can, there's only so much that you can do to, basically silo them from all the horrors of the world. because the problem is that their friends, they're not seeing it through the devices that you give them, they're going to see them through the devices that their friends have. And they're going to be going, oh, have a look at this, have a look at this, have a look at this. And the biggest shocker, I do a lot of talks for parents and at schools and for kids as well. And one of the things that I would say is a biggest frightener for parents is the age that kids most often are first exposed to pornography. And it can be hideously young. It
What are
can
we
be
talking?
like 7, 6 years old.
No.
Yeah, seriously.
But how? Like how?
From
Surely
their friends.
but
From
the
their friends.
parents need to take responsibility
Absolutely.
for this.
100%.
They are shit parents if
They
their
are.
kids are accessing porn at age 6.
Yeah.
And I know I'm meant to be all love and light and not judgment, but
Yeah.
this is like real talk here.
Yeah, big time. But the problem is that kids are going to see it. As much as you try and protect them from it, they're going to see it. They're going to get access to that content because, going back to the days when, I was that age, we didn't have the internet. We didn't have, the access that kids are afforded now. You literally go on your phone and you can go and see anything online. The second thing was one of the things that I talked about in as one chapter, and I cover everything: pornography, I cover buying drugs online, all sorts of things. One of the things I covered was sexting, and basically the publishers went, "Oh, well, you can't start talking about things like sexting." And I said, "It's going to happen. You can try and stop them. I mean, their parents are probably doing it more than the kids, to be fair, but the kids are going to do it. So the only thing I can suggest and recommend is that they're doing it safely. And they're doing it in a way that it doesn't compromise them. And having protected a few people who've been blackmailed through revenge porn, and to this day, nobody has been incarcerated for a revenge porn. I don't know what's going to happen with Stephen Bear.
I was just about to ask what's happening with him.
I think that's still pending, obviously sentencing to see what happens. But he'll probably get he won't probably get a custodial. I would have thought he's going to get suspended, which is disgusting.
Yeah.
Personally, I think throw him in jail, shut the keys away, because anybody who uses that kind of material to basically coerce, control, intimidate someone or even
And degrade them as well.
Degrade them is just disgusting.
Mm-hmm.
But there are three things that I've always said, and obviously here's the other irony: I don't have any kids, so here I am writing a book about how to protect kids. Three things that I say to every single parent. They say, "Come on, Will, how do you wrap it up?" I'd say 3 T's. Okay, first thing is trust. You've got to trust your kid to make right decisions.
Mm-hmm.
They won't always make those right decisions, but you've got to trust them to be. If you start putting spyware on their phones or their devices and they find it and they didn't know it was there, then they go down a rabbit hole. And then they'll see those and parental controls as basically challenges. The second thing is talking, and that goes with the trust. And it's sitting down and looking at their online lives as much as their offline lives and going, who is Timmy? Who is Fred that you play Call of Duty with, or that you do Minecraft with, or that you meet up online and chat with? If they were saying, I'm going to go out and meet my buddies and play in the park, you go, whose kids are they? Who are their parents? Did you meet them at school? But so many parents don't when it comes online because they think it's a whole other world. It's not a tangible world. It is a tangible world. And the third thing really is teamwork. And that is with trust, talking, and then teamwork. The most important thing is for the child to be able to feel that if something goes wrong, they can come to you and you may say, I'm going to scream and shout at you, but not now. I'm going to do it later. Let's get you out of this hole right now.
Yeah.
It's like when I get pulled in to deal with something really controversial or compromising for someone, and boy, nothing shocks me now, Ellie.
Oh, God, right. So what is the most,
Nothing.
obviously we're not naming names, we'll not name names, but what is the most controversial situation you've been called in to handle?
At one end, loads of affairs. I've had loads of those where people have been caught out on those.
What do they do in that situation then? Because surely the damage has been done.
Well, it's usually because they've had an affair and then the partner, the mistress or whoever else the guy might be, or the guy is, to the client who's either male or female, and I'll come on to another context of that in a moment, has turned around and said, I want money, I want this, I want that, I want you to leave your wife. If you don't, I'm going to show them these intimate pictures, I'm going to talk to them, I'm going to compromise them at work, I'm going to do all this sort of stuff. So had all those. I think the most controversial one was he was a QC, I won't mention any names, who had a bit of a penchant for transsexuals and decided to take lots of recreational drugs and alcohol, and they live streamed their shenanigans to a third party who recorded the whole thing and then blackmailed them. So,
How can
there's
people
nothing
be
that shocks
so
me now.
big? You know what I don't get is how such intelligent people can be so thick. Because you were saying about the sexting with adults, I wouldn't even have anything compromising on my phone, knowing how easily accessible from
Yeah,
big. It's not even about someone.
it's big tech.
Yeah, people have had their phones hacked. That
Yeah.
does happen.
It does. It does happen. Yeah. And anything you put online is on there forever.
Yeah.
If you know where to look, you'll find it.
I feel so sorry for the younger generation now because, I mean, thankfully I have my own business, but I would categorically be unemployable if there was footage kicking about from my teenage years when I was drinking White Lightning cider. And
White Lightning.
God,
Classy girl.
I was a classy girl. I mean, that was a rite of passage, age of 14 in Scotland, actually. So it's with your deep fried Mars bars, but it was certainly an interesting time. And sometimes we say stupid shit. Joe
course we
Rogan,
do.
putting aside the children and the teenagers, I just think it's such a shame for them to be held accountable and people losing jobs from tweets they made age 16. When
Yes, that's ridiculous.
they've
That's
said something a little inappropriate. But some journalists went through Joe Rogan's entire back catalogue. I mean, nobody would do that with mine because I've not got a big enough profile, but I need to clean stuff up before I kind of hit the big league, if you like, because you can mash up words. If you listen to enough of somebody's content or enough of someone's posts, and you can find some really inappropriate material for 99.9% of us, should you dig hard enough.
Yeah.
And it's quite an interesting one. Last time we spoke, when we had a Zoom as well, you were telling me about high-profile business people. This is this isn't uncommon that they could come over from the States or wherever else, stay in a really opulent 5-star hotel, be at the hotel bar having one too many.
Yeah.
And quite often when these people are there, well, I'll let you tell the story because after we had this conversation, I saw an article in the Daily Mail the very next day. I was like, this is such a coincidence. I wonder if it's one of Will's clients.
Yeah. And I would neither confirm nor deny, would I, Ellie? I mean, that was one particular instance, which was, which is very easy for us to get in line. It's funny, I put a comment on something the other day. There was something that was put up of a young girl who was spiked in a bar. And it's amazing how many people sort of responded to because I basically put up, okay, this is what you do if this has happened and how you should respond to it. But this particular incident, a perfectly innocent businessman, came over, went to the bar, ended up being befriended by someone who spiked their drink, took them on a complete adventure that night, strip bars, house parties, God knows what, compromising photographs were taken, and then it was, give us the money. And if you don't give the money, we're going to tell your family, we're going to tell your business, all sorts of things. I've got fucking zero time for people like that. I want to step on them and crush them out of existence. And there have been examples made in certain circumstances, but I won't go into details.
You're not giving me any of the juice.
Oh, maybe. But yeah, I mean, there's the problem is there's also this issue where people like myself, people in my sector, that we're going to only grow and grow and grow as the police are depreciating in their ability to be able to protect the general public. It's funny, a very good mate of mine, you should have him on as a guest, Mark Williams-Thomas. You may know Mark. He broke the whole Jimmy Savile sort of expose.
Oh, really? Wow.
And he's a good buddy of mine. And he's been doing quite a lot around the Nicola Bulley thing as well. And he's done stuff on the Madeleine McCann. He's got a few documentaries on Netflix. There you go, Mark, pay me royalties. But he and I sat down and we said, look, why don't we do a show together? And we'll call it, be like the new equalizers. So, we will basically go into places where people haven't got the money to access our services normally. And we'll make a TV show out of it. And we will go in and we will resolve issues. It could be antisocial behavior. It could be bullying in a neighborhood. It could be, some hooligans come in and it's terrorizing all the neighbors. We'll come in and we'll basically dismantle them. But we'll do it not in a sort of brutal physical sense. We will do it in a psychological sense, and we will basically break it down and use it, and basically show the police up and say, look, guys, this is your opportunity to shine. This is your chance to regain some confidence from the general public and show that you can be a service to your communities. Or you're going to show yourselves to be effing useless and that it's unfortunately down to the general public. And I don't endorse vigilante behavior. unless it's done in a very directed and very clever and smart and legal way. So we were hoping there was going to be like take home that would come from it. So any TV channels out there? Let me know.
Oh, so did this not actually get off the ground then?
No, we never got it off the ground because we're too damn busy. That's the problem. So it's finding the time to do it and crack on. But there needs to be, it's funny, like with the watch robberies here in London, I put something out basically saying, look, I want to put together a snatch team. So we'll get someone as beautiful as you, Ellie, to walk down the street with an Audemars Piguet, or a nice Rolex Daytona, and we will have a team. We will box up basically the area covertly, get you to walk through, wait for the watch robbers to come in, and then we will pounce, hog tie them, get the cops along, video the whole thing. And I remember talking to one of the TV channels, they said, yeah, we want to do this. We never got it off the ground. But the number of guys in my community, a lot of security guys, and I get a lot of security guys following me on my Instagram, said, Will, we're in, we want to join. And it was like, we want to give back to our communities. And where the police are unable to support, we want to be able to help out. And thank God for that, because, and I'm not saying that for me, I'm saying I'm really pleased other people in the industry want to help as well. Because unfortunately, we don't live in safe times, and they just seem to be getting a little bit worse.
I was just speaking to a family member who is in the police. I think she's in the CID, and she was telling me that there was, I'll not name the city because it might identify her, but a city in the north of England, there was 8 of them on duty on Saturday night, and very senior members of the team are just getting out to respond to mental health crisis because there's no resources within the crisis teams. She said she had to sit with somebody in A&E for 14 hours. So straight away, that's 2 of your 8 officers out the mix completely. And she said it's an absolute breaking point. Her job was at one point to go and persuade somebody to go back to A&E, but she said they've been waiting 16 hours to be seen. And it's difficult because you, as an individual, wouldn't be willing to sit there for 16 hours. So you're going to try and persuade somebody that's perhaps not got all their faculties there, or, is in crisis mode, to sit for even longer. And it's sad, but it also, every negative has a positive, doesn't it? And it's going to make your services so in demand. But where you differ, because I mentioned that you are like the real life James Bond. You've worked with A-list celebs, you've worked with the top level people, but you also work incognito as well.
Yeah.
However, you do have quite a public media profile. You're no stranger to TV. You are, I know you don't like to hear people refer to you as it because you're very humble, but you are a bit of a celebrity. Does that ever put you at odds with other people that are doing perhaps the same as what you're doing, arguably with less success because they're less well known?
Less so now. I mean, I've got my haters out there, and I love them. It goes back to the thing we were saying earlier. People will sometimes, and one of the things that makes me probably more hateable, and I can't blame them, is I don't come from one of the traditional backgrounds. And I would try and champion for the civvies out there to say you don't have to have walked out of the gates of Sterling Lines, after 14 years in the special forces, or out of Poole, or out of the police, or out of Vauxhall, or out of Thames House. You can be if you push hard. And there's something I'm going to come on to, which is I think about the sort of inherent core things that we need to have as individuals to survive these days, but also hopefully to get some success, is the fact that, there will be people that hate me, but I get a lot less these days than I used to. At the start, it was, he's a Walter, he's this, he's that.
What's a Walter?
A Walter Mitty. So basically pretending to be something that I'm not.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I forget you're a bit older than me. Google who Walter Mitty is soon.
So mean. I thought I was going to leave happy. But yeah, I mean, the one thing you've got to be absolutely honest about is never, and I think this is a general rule in life, don't lie about who you are, but own who you are. If your failings, your inadequacies, your vulnerabilities and everything else, own it. Don't try, because the problem, and particularly in our industry, it's like the running joke is, the SAS is the biggest regiment in the British Army because there are so many guys who claim to have been in it. Like the famous balcony at the Iranian embassy. They said if everybody who claimed that they were actually on that balcony literally during the Iranian siege, the balcony would have collapsed. So it's about being honest about who you are and pushing through. And one of the things for me is you've got to have some self-belief, not in a weird, deluded way, but you've just got to be convicted by having confidence. We all have imposter syndrome. Every single one of us. I will often have moments where, I may be doing a TED talk soon. Someone's very kindly invited me to do one. And I'm thinking, really? Am I qualified to do it? What the hell am I going to talk about? That sort of thing. I mean, doing podcasts is so much more fun because it's just like us sitting over a drink and just rambling, albeit first thing in the morning. And it is about, getting past that imposter syndrome, and it's being confident. And I've sat in rooms back in the early days of my career where there were people far more qualified, far more experienced, sat there, arms crossed, looking at me going, what are you going to teach us? And I'm going, oh.
Well, let's talk a little bit about how you got started, because if my research serves me correctly, you and your business partner at the time were young whippersnappers with nothing, in terms of money behind you.
Zero.
You were completely skint.
Yeah.
You were cycling way before cycling was the in thing to do, to various meetings to try and win clients over. How did it all come about? Because like you just said there, a lot of people will presume you've came from the special forces, but actually that wasn't your route into it.
And the funny thing about that is that people say, you're ex-SAS, aren't you? Or you're ex-MI6. And I go, no. And they go, but you would say that.
That's true. How did you acquire your particular set of skills?
Well, I watched Taken on repeat about 48 times. So how I started was, so I'd had a history in martial arts. I started at the age of 7. My dad was a boxer. And then back in the 70s, doing judo was pretty much the only accessible, generally accessible martial art. And I loved it, really got it, stuck into it. And I just followed it. And then the Bruce Lee movies came out, Enter the Dragon. And so I was like, a bit like Matt, Matt Fiddes, who's been another guest of yours and a friend of mine. We've all got bitten by the martial art bug. And over time, I'd traveled with it, and I'd done some training in Southeast Asia and in Japan and various different parts of the world. Anyway, cut a very long story, or a short story long, ended up with this friend of mine who's I met over a lunch, a guy who was ex-parachute regiment, and he said, look, I've been teaching self-defense to some women in a local sort of community centre, and you've got a wealth of martial arts experience. Would you be able to come and have a look, throw a few ideas in? So I went, yeah, what the hell, why not? I can't remember what I was doing at the time, but went and met with him, threw a couple of ideas in, and we got on like best buddies. And we went, right, why don't we take this idea and actually take it to people's offices? So rather than these girls having to leave work and come over to this community centre or whatever, they come, basically, we go to them. So the first client was a really big industrial company that we managed to obtain. And this guy was a legend, absolute legend, still is, in the security industry. He's retired now. And us two young pups walk in the door and we go, right, we're going to teach self-defense, for your girls. And he's like, really? And we were like, yeah. And we go, look, we're not going to charge you. We'll come and do it for free. And if it goes down well, then, book some more and, we'll charge. So he actually took a gamble on us. And I love him for that. To this day, I thank him enormously for his just conviction and belief in us being able to deliver it. And again, it comes back to this thing we talked about right at the very beginning. Chemistry was right. Mm-hmm. And as I say to always, when I meet new clients, I say, if the colour of our eyes match and you like the colour of my eyes, then we're going to work well. If you don't, it ain't going to happen. But he obviously did. We ended up teaching. We then went into places, big banks. We went into some of the biggest advertising agencies, places like Saatchi, Ogilvy and Mather. And we just targeted companies which had a high female sort of workforce, so advertising agencies, it's a no-brainer.
Can I just ask, what was your technique for getting in front of such large organizations?
Well, what we did was, our plan was, you go to the leading company in each of those industry sectors and you get them on board by whatever means possible, even if you say we're going to do it for free. And then you say, if we do it for free, if you like it, the feedback's positive, can we get a referral from you? And it was back in the days where you would get a nice letter which said, I'm head of training or head of security or whatever, or head of human resources. And then we'd have that. And then basically we would go into their competitor or the next, company which was the second size down or the next one down. And we go and say, look, we trained at Ogilvy and Mather or such and such. So, they've endorsed. And they go, oh, yeah, okay, well, if they employed you, then you can't be too bad.
You know
And
what?
we
This
did
is
that.
the
It's
skill
simple.
of life. This is exactly what I did with my podcast. I don't know if you've heard me talk about this before, but at the very start, I had a mutual connection with Ricky Hatton, the boxer.
Yeah.
And he's the only guest that I've actually paid to have on the show. He wanted a fee.
Oh, wow.
And actually, that's not
So I'm
uncommon.
not getting a fee today.
Hang on, I'm waiting for the money to hit my account. But I just treated that as a marketing expense. It was a couple of £1,000, but to secure a childhood idol and someone that had such a big profile was a real comfort zone stretcher as well,
Yeah.
because I hadn't really at that point had any experience around celebrities or anything like that. And it's the best money that I ever spent,
Yeah.
because once I'd secured Ricky and interviewed him and I'm approaching other people, even though the podcast was still in its infancy and my downloads, were my mum, my dad and, some auntie somewhere, it was the fact and the prestige of having Ricky Hatton and the presumption, without you telling any lies, that your podcast must
Absolutely.
be bigger than it is because
Yeah.
you've had Ricky Hatton.
Yeah.
And you said to me before we hit recording, you've had some incredible guests, and thankfully I have. And the more incredible guests you get, the more it kind of just
Snowballs,
continues
yeah.
to snowball. And actually, a lot of these people now, high profile people, I'm in such a fortunate position that they're contacting me. But if you just go straight to the top and secure
Yeah.
someone like you're just
Yeah.
saying there, then it's very easy to get the others to follow suit.
Absolutely. And it is fake it till you make it.
It really is.
It really is. And for us, we would, we would wander in. We literally wore black tracksuits. I've always worn black.
Uh-huh.
Even before the movie came out, I was known as the man in black. And, we would go in there, tracksuits, polo shirts, and be like, ee. He was a good looking guy. I brought the ugly. And so, all these girls were like, oh, okay, these two guys are going to teach us how to protect ourselves. And boy, oh boy, we taught proper stuff. Any of the listeners who may recall me or Mark coming into their company and training them, we taught full contact.
Mm-hmm.
So, and within a very limited time, and this was very, very raw street fighting. This was, and literally Mark and I would wear neck braces, we'd wear head guards, the funniest thing, and this will make any martial artist out there laugh, we'd get these cushions, literally sort of like cushions you'd have on your sofa, and stuff them down the front of our things with a box as well, because literally we were teaching them to whack in there and kick in there as hard as possible. And we had, I did have a number of women who got in touch subsequently and said, I sadly had to put it into practice, and it worked a treat. And one of my favourite ones was this woman who would come out of Hendon tube station up in North London, and she said, I'd had my headphones in, which is a real no-no in my book. When you're moving about, do it when you're sat down, do it when you're sat on the tube, do it when at home, but don't walk down the street with it.
Yeah.
And this guy grabbed her from behind and literally tried to drag her into an alleyway, and we taught her a technique. And the thing with the full contact training that we taught, and we didn't have any mats. We're hitting the concrete floor of these conference rooms that we're teaching in. So, Mark and I would come back with eggs on us of bruises and lumps and swellings and stuff from having the crap kicked out of us. But she got dragged into this alleyway, put into practice this technique that we taught, and got away. She called the police. The police turned up to try and find him, found a tooth, and then started looking a little further, found him still in an embryo position, in a fetal position, sort of in a corner. And the police basically said he was completely mashed up, and she couldn't even remember what she did. She literally did it from sort of muscle memory from what we taught.
But
and for me, God, that's my job done. That makes me so happy.
But I was going to say, is that not the ultimate success? Obviously, we want to be abundant in all areas of our life, but to actually provide such value that you've potentially stopped somebody getting raped or murdered is such a, wow, that's just such
a privilege.
It's a real privilege. And it was interesting. I studied I say studied loosely. Okay, I did martial arts for years. I did it as a child. I did Shotokai karate. And then as an adult, I started it again. And I'm just one of those people, or actually I shouldn't say this because that's the story I'm telling myself, But in the past, I've had problems with memory retention. So some of these routines, katas or what have you, were very complicated for me.
Yeah.
And I could never remember them, to be
Yeah.
honest. And it used to be embarrassing. I used to say, put my hand up and say, can you run through that with me again? And they always would do. But after the third or fourth time, you can, and you've still not got it. You feel like you have to just say, oh, yeah, brilliant, thank you. Because, you know, people get annoyed at you. That's a reality.
Oh, that's a bad teacher.
But there was one, well, yes, arguably that's true as well. But you know, when you're like the class dunce,
Doesn't matter.
It's there's different learning styles for different people, isn't there? But there was this one guy who used to do self-defense classes, and they were completely separate, and they were on a Friday night, and it was real spit and sawdust.
Yeah.
And the people were literally drawing blood. It was that brutal. But I remember one night he said to me, right, okay, what would you normally do on a Friday? I was in my early 20s. We used to all pile straight into the pub
Yeah.
after work. He said, how much would you normally drink? I'm like, oh, well, at least 2 large glasses of white wine or whatever I used to drink.
White lightning.
Yeah, not white lightning. I progressed to white wine. I'm far more sophisticated these days, of course. But anyway, he says, right, okay. And I always wear high heels, still do to this day. He was like, right, I want you to turn up after you 2 large glasses of wine, wearing what you would normally wear, not barefoot, not like with all your faculties about
Yeah.
you, how you would actually be walking about in a true to life situation. And he was putting me in situations which felt very uncomfortable. He's like, right, okay, grab me from behind.
Yeah.
Then he's nixing, he's straddling me, he's got
Yeah.
his hands around my throat. He's like, I'm going to rape you now. And it's like, when you're not used to that, you're used to the more softly martial arts. It's like, fucking hell, this is
Yeah.
a bit OTT. But that's exactly what I wanted for myself. And it's exactly what I want for my daughters growing up. It's prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with all of that. I think, the problem with some of those fixed cutters, and, I studied karate for a while, and it didn't work for me. I think also if you're going to teach kids, and again, we're cycling back to the bullying thing potentially, that you've got to learn, if you learn a martial art, you've got to learn full contact. So I like the old Mike Tyson saying, everyone's got a plan until they get hit in the face.
Yeah.
And if you can't take a hit, and it comes as a surprise, what will happen is it's a bit like, so if I'm using a firearm, and I was off overseas the other day, a couple of weeks ago, and I hadn't been on a range for ages, and my targeting was still good. But, if I'm off to do an operation, I'm going to be armed. I will get some range time before I do so. So you get used to the crack, of the actual bullet. So you're not getting that sort of like that and blinking and flinching because you've become unused to it. The same is also with, someone laying hands on you, moving you around, forcefully pushing you about. It charges up the adrenaline. It also breaks you out of that whole freezing process as well.
Mm-hmm.
But the point you made about how people are trained and how you were trained wearing, your high heels, one of the things which I think was so successful, and we had so much fun doing it, was that when we turned up at people's offices, obviously everybody was in their workwear. And they go, oh, should I go and change into my tracksuit and my sneakers? And we go, no. You wear exactly what you're wearing right now, because if it doesn't work with what you're wearing right now, it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
And the point is, you've got to know how to do it when you are in high heels, when you've got a short skirt on, when you've got, you're completely sort of restricted by whatever it is. You've got your overcoat on. We need to make this as realistic as possible. And it didn't mean that we sort of knocked the girls about or anything like that. But we certainly moved them around very aggressively, and and we did. We had so much fun. It brought out our best acting skills. So we're going, all right, darling, come on, give us a kiss, and doing all this sort of stuff. But we do it in a dark room, and then we do.
That was the only difference to the weekend down the
I
local,
know,
was
I
it?
know. Hang on. Was that my weekend, or was that the training? and then we'd actually have the pair of us. So Mark and I would both attack the girl. That was kind of like the finale. We'd bring them all in, but we'd sit them outside and we'd play psychological games on them. So like the very first woman who was actually in the room and the others are queued up outside, we'd say, now scream really loudly. So the girl would go, ah, like this. And whoever the other instructor, either me or Mark, was outside with the other girls, you could see their faces go, oh, shit. And the whole thing was just to build up that complete fear and that complete, oh my God.
Yeah.
Get them out of that freezing process. Get them to basically fire up and just go, "Rah." And I mean, there were some girls who really felt were naturals.
Yeah.
Let's put it that way.
Pent up aggression in there. But you know what? It's interesting because even people who are trained at fighting, unless you're actually putting them in those high pressure situations, you don't know how you're going to react because I would encourage anyone to go and learn a martial art 100%.
Definitely.
I don't
Or
want to
boxing.
sound like,
I'm
or
a
boxing.
big boxing fan.
Yeah, exactly. Or any of it, MMA. But so much of what I'd learned previously was about getting my defender down or repelling attack. It wasn't really how do you react if you're already down on the ground and someone's already on top of you. Now, what do you do in this situation? It was almost like that situation was never considered or addressed in the vast majority of the practice.
No, absolutely. And I think any martial art, do not concentrate on one. Mix it up. Do a good striking martial art, a good kicking. Do something like Muay Thai, or kickboxing, which is great. So you're working on your legs, you're working on your kicks, you're working on your punches, but also do a bit of judo or do a bit of jiu-jitsu and learn a bit of groundwork so you can cover up here and down there. And I mean, I'll probably get a few more haters to add to my list when I talk about jiu-jitsu. And jiu-jitsu is a great martial artist, but it is not the sole solution. It's like in the same way people say to me, they say, who's the best special forces in the world? I know guys from SEAL teams, I know guys from Delta Force, I know guys from the SAS, SBS, GSG-9, all sorts of various different units around the world. No one group is the best in the world. Everybody brings their expertise to the table.
Can I ask you a question? I can't remember where I heard this. The Israeli Special Forces kill puppy dogs and cats to psychologically prepare them for going to...
Killing humans?
Yes.
Nah.
That doesn't happen?
No.
Okay.
No.
That's
I mean,
news.
I
never thought I'd ask that question.
That's good. I love it. I love it. I've never been asked that question before. I've worked with some of the Israeli guys. There's some really, really good Israeli martial artists. But again, it's like people say, "Oh, Israeli Special Forces the best in the world?" No, they're not. No.
Well, who is then?
There isn't one. I'm going to have natural allegiances to the UK. I have met some Delta Force guys, Rangers, SEALs. The SAS and the SBS and Special Reconnaissance Regiment. I mean, the SRR, Special Reconnaissance Regiment. They're the proper James Bondy mob. They're proper real James Bonds, not me. And I've got lovely friends, both having served and still serving in both the SAS and the SBS. And the thing is there's a great podcast out there with a hilarious ex-SEAL Team 6 guy called DJ Shipley, if you can look it up. And this encapsulates it perfectly. It's this little clip where he basically talks to the podcast host, who turns around and says, the thing, those SAS boys, I really like them. And he says, why? And he says, well, we're in, I don't know, it's Iraq or Afghanistan. And he goes, these SAS guys walk in and they've got an American flag, US flag patch on their shoulder. And he goes, what's that for? And he goes, got to blame someone. And that sums up probably most of the SAS and SBS guys I know. They're just like that, just scamps.
It's really interesting. I always fancied myself as a bit of a female James Bond. I wanted to be a bit.
I think it'd be a good one.
Yeah, a bit of a Nikita type. I used to have this in my head that I could be really acrobatic and have all these like skills and just be able to, kill people, really. there's no other way to describe it.
Do we need to talk this through?
We don't need to discuss it through. I'm getting counselling. But obviously the bad guys, which is quite interesting now because I'm very like peace and love. But anyway, I wanted to do two things growing up. One was to basically be a glorified assassin, a James Bond type. The other thing was to be a missionary and go do loads of humanity work overseas.
Or a missionary is your cover. That's your legend.
Yes,
when
I think
you go into these countries and carry out these attacks. You'd be great as part of the increment, you see.
Well, I think if you can incorporate a bit of both, you've really hit the jackpot, haven't you? But my dreams got dashed. I can still remember it. I was about 12 years old and definitely veering more towards the assassin than the missionary at this point. Had an opportunity to really demonstrate my skills. We had a French exchange trip over from Guyancourt, who we were twins with.
This is already starting well.
Yeah, starting well. Off to do some Laser Quest. So
I used to love a bit of Laser Quest.
Yeah, a bit of Laser Quest. I'm taking these guys down. There's 40 of us.
Yeah.
I'm thinking this is brilliant. So I'm there giving it all the moves. Like literally I'm doing like front rolls and jumping up and twisting round and just showing the world what I'm capable of.
Yeah.
Very confident, very self-assured and just very much enjoying my time as a wannabe assassin. And at the end of it, this is a true story. I remember looking up at the leaderboard and I was in complete shock. And I'm still like, there must have been something wrong. There must have been something wrong because out of 40 people, I fully 100% expected to be number one. Guess what number it was?
2, 1.
I was 40th.
What?
Yeah. So I thought I'll
The
focus more.
dream was crushed.
I'll focus more on the missionary stuff, you know.
No. Never let that push you back. You should have been back in Laser Quest the next day.
I should have been, but I was just so genuinely confused. I was like, you know, when you think you're world class at something, it turns out you're pretty shit.
You know what? But it's like some people are hearing me regale my stories of, fights and stuff like that.
And I'm comparing it to Laser Quest.
No, not at all, Ellie. I mean, the one thing I know is never, ever underestimate anybody.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the good people I've met, loveliest, charmingest, just kindest people, which is why the puppy and kitty thing just wouldn't wash, know. If I was there, I'd be shooting the instructor.
Yeah.
I wouldn't kill a kitty for all the tea in China.
Yeah.
Never. Or a dog for that matter.
Yeah.
Well, a dog. No. I'm a cat fan. No, I love dogs too. Don't you find that a strange thing? People who love dogs go, oh, I don't like cats. But people who love cats love dogs as well. Something to be said about dog fans. Anyway, they can be the most dangerous people. I mean, I have to say, some of the nicest people I know are the scariest people when the switch is turned and they're doing the job. And the guys who are all sort of like steely-eyed and sort of chisel-jawed, generally not, when it comes to it and it all kicks off, are not as, scary as you might have first thought. But I underestimate nobody. And I know there's always someone out there who's faster, stronger, more violent than I am.
Yeah.
But I'm probably that more than most other people out there.
I think the self-awareness is huge. But that's the whole grey man concept, isn't it? You
yeah.
don't want to stand out. People who are truly elite want to blend in within your sector.
Yeah.
So how does it, you mentioned back in the day, at the start of your career, experiencing imposter syndrome. I can't get my words out. For a podcaster, that is not a good thing. Imposter syndrome. Thank you very much. Can you remember the first time that you met a A-list celebrity and how were you able to kind of keep playing it cool?
Okay, so, God, who was the first celebrity? I'm trying to think who the very first one was. I can't remember, actually, if I'm honest, Ellie. I can't remember who the first celebrity was. But yeah, I do remember back in the very early days, you'd walk in the door and they'd look at you and go, so, and one of the biggest challenges is if someone's had security before is educating them to what security should be and being convinced and convicted that the way that you're doing it is the right way of doing it. So it is literally going in there and it's very easy to get pushed over. And I do see, sometimes you see online the bodyguards with their principal and they're not really doing the job. And people are very quick to judge and say, oh, well, they're shit bodyguards. They may have been cowed out so much that they can't push back. But there has to be a moment where you, as a professional, have to turn around and say, there's only so much I'm prepared to do. And I remember having this with one of my guys with a very, very well-known celebrity. And they were getting out of a car outside a posh hotel in Chicago. And he called me straight after this. And the PAs, to all you PAs out there, we're here to help you. We're here to work with you. We're here to make your life easier. And if we're the right people, we're here to make you look brilliant. So stop being a fucking pain in the arse to us, all right? Give us the information when we need it. And this one particular PA turned round as the principal got out. My guy, Mark, literally moved him. There were lots of people outside the hotel. Moved him straight through, moved him through the hotel lobby, got him into the lift. And as they got into the lift, it wasn't a big lift, other sort of hotel guests were trying to get in, and he just went, sorry, no. And the door's shut. And the principal, who's got very, very big public following, turned around and went, oh, I'm mortified. How could you stop those people coming in there? And he said, look, to be honest, boss, that's fuck all I could do. If someone came in here with a knife and wanted to stick it in you, we're in close prox. But prior to them getting into the lift, when they got out of the car, the PA turned around to Mark and said, get the bags, Mark, get the bags. Mark just ignored her and just, moved the principal through. Anyway, later she kicks off. She calls me up and she goes, "That's Mark character you've got on your team. He's just not helping whatsoever." I'm like, "Well, let me look into this, see what I can find out." So I call him up and I go, "What happened, buddy? What did you do now?" And he turns around and he says, "Look, I was getting the principal out, moving him, debussing him from the vehicle into the hotel. And the PA is shouting at the bags and I just ignored her." So I said, "Great, that's cool." So I call her back and I said, "Look, did you know he's armed?" And she went, "Yes." I said, "What happens if he's holding these bags? Something happens and he can't get to his weapon. Who's standing in court facing the judge, gripping the rail? He is, not you. So shut up."
Yeah. Yeah.
And literally, it's so amazing how so many of these PAs. I mean, one of the things I put up on my Instagram the other day was, even if you're working with a VIP, it doesn't make you a VIP.
Mm.
And that's something that we should never, ever lose sight of. I know I'm the help, and I will tug my forelock. And I will call, it's like people who call me up and say, "Hey, Will," and I've never spoken to them before. I'm old school. If I'm with a client, I'll call them boss, I'll call them chief, I'll call them, sir, whatever.
Oh, that's very interesting.
Until they turn around and say, "No, please call me Simon, please call me Paul, please call me, whatever." And even then, I'll still pepper it with a sir or a boss or a chief to remind them that I've not forgotten my place.
Oh, you know what? This is so fascinating that you should say that, because I'm the complete opposite. You're providing a valuable service. What makes that individual any more important than you? They're a specialist in their field. You're a specialist in your field. True, but you get paid based on your value, and you provide a tremendous amount of value.
Yeah.
Why be subservient?
It's not subservient. It's respectful. It's not subservient. What is sir? It's 3 letters that basically, when put together, is a mark of respect and also of their position. It doesn't make me a lesser person for calling them sir or boss or chief, but it makes them feel better because they feel that they are being appreciated. I've worked with, but if they're a total dick, then I won't call them sir or boss.
Yeah.
I'll just say, "George," whatever. But it's nice. People get a glow, and it's like, I think the biggest measure, and I know this is an old thing, and you've probably had this covered a million times, Ellie, a real telltale of the value of someone is how they treat servers.
Exactly.
If someone's serving you a cup of coffee or whatever, and you say, "Thank you, sir," or "ma'am," or whatever, you know what? That 9 times out of 10, you won't get any acknowledgement. But for that one person, it might be that moment in their day where they go, "Actually, I feel valued for what I do here." Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. It's just an interesting perspective. I worked in the prisons for quite a few years in my
Blimey.
previous life, and they have the same sort of tradition. It's boss or ma'am or sir to, the inmates, to the prison officers or the staff members. And I was the only one that used to say, "Look, I'm Ellie, I'm not above you, I'm not below you." It used to make me feel a little bit uncomfortable, probably
Really?
because I think I would have an issue calling somebody else sir or ma'am. I don't know if
Really?
that's my inner rebel. And that's not to say that I wouldn't be respectful towards them. I just don't believe in, I don't think this is what you're saying, but it could be construed as putting someone on a bit of a pedestal just because they've got more money than you or more fame than you or more business
That's
acumen.
more about me. That's if I felt that, that would be more about me and my
Yeah.
inadequacies and my vulnerability or feeling submissive. Me saying, "Sir, chief, boss," it's just, hey, because there could be occasions, and I have had occasions where I'll grab them by the neck and I'll launch
That's
them
more
into
my
a
style.
vehicle, and that's just on my dates. I'll literally grab them and I'll launch them literally, into a car, or there'll be a problem and I'll literally manhandle them. I have my company has contracts with all the people we look after, and it's and there's a hands-on clause which basically says, we may end up breaking jewelry, wrists, ribs, whatever, in the process of protecting you, because we need to move you super quick out of the threat. If someone's pulled a knife or a machete or a gun or whatever it might be, we need to move them super quick. So, and I have had that where I've thrown people into cars and they've come out and they've gone, "Oh, you broke about 3 ribs." I'm going, "Yeah, but you're alive.
Yeah.
You're breathing. Only just, but you're breathing."
You know what? I really like that, Will, because I always like to challenge my own way of thinking. I'm definitely not a close minded person. And just through you saying that's made me think perhaps it's a element of ego, my reluctance to perhaps acknowledge people with certain titles. Although I definitely do that in reverse as well, as I demonstrated with a prison example.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because in your line of work, more so than most, you really need to detach yourself from ego.
Yeah, totally. But also you have to be very convicted. So there may be things where you will say no. I mean, I remember there was a very famous action movie star that I looked after.
Oh, who was it?
And
Well, not tell anyone, Will. Not tell anyone.
He's good looking, bit of a party boy. And I was looking after him during his prime. And we would go out and literally
That's not giving much away.
Oh, you've seen some of his movies.
You're
Most of them are
such
direct to
a-
DVD these days. I'm not talking about Seagal, who's a douchebag. This guy is hilarious. Good-looking guy, maybe from Europe. Let's just put it that way. And he was hilarious. And literally go out and in the most misogynistic way, used to be chasing women all night, and usually come back with at least 3 or 4.
Oh, wow.
And I would literally say, no, we're leaving now. Or I had a supermodel once that I was looking after who was she was very famous, and she was married to or engaged to a band member of a very big US rock band, and she would literally get very, very drunk. And every boy in the room would be after her because she was pretty famous at the time. And I was fireman lifting her out of nightclubs because she'd had too much to drink and would literally fall apart. So the thing is that I would still call him ma'am, I'd still call him sir, I'd still call him chief. Doesn't mean anything other than it reminds you that I'm here, but there will be times where I'm just going to enforce my will for your safety and your protection.
Yeah, I love that. And interestingly, what you said there just triggered another memory from when we were chatting previously. When you have been dealing with some beautiful, high profile A-list celebrity women, Hollywood actresses, you've had, like you said, there, supermodels, etc. You were always surprised to hear that they really struggled to find decent blokes, and quite often, by their own admission, ended up going out with quite often not good looking and not particularly good people.
No, not good people at all. I mean, this is the thing. I've had this conversation with, sort of female friends of mine, that they resign themselves, and particularly, very beautiful ones like yourself, Ellie.
You can see why you're called the real life James Bond.
Your partner's a lucky guy. That they would, because they're so beautiful, they're so famous, they would appear to be unattainable. And, any sort of normal nice guy would simply just not approach, because they'd go, you've got to be kidding. This is X. They're bound to have A partner, B, 1,000 men in waiting to go in, and they've got their pick of any man they want. And so they wouldn't even make that approach. And then it would be that sort of complete tit that you would have in a nightclub that most women have experienced at some point or another. You come and say, give me your number, give me your number, give me your number. And they just literally persevere until either they get punched on the nose or their partner punches them on the nose, until that girl goes, oh, for fuck's sake, nobody else is asking. So yeah, go on, here's my number. And they've resigned to the fact that those are the only kind of people that are actually asking them out. But they are always fraught with disaster, because the guy's either trying to build up his career, build up his life, his profile, or make money, or live the good life, or whatever it might be. And, so many of these really beautiful, famous A-list actresses that I've met have been so vulnerable and insecure. And literally, I'm like, you have everything. You got money, you got fame, you got beautiful looks. What are you going to be insecure about? And they're like, well, they'll keep me this shitty man. And I'm like, and I go, stop picking anybody on my team. That's not happening.
It's interesting, the wider point there, though. What is the definition of success? It's something that we explore a lot on this podcast, as you know, because it's not just about the money, the beautiful body, the multi-million-pound mansion. If you're
But
not
enough
doing...
about me, Ellie.
I mean, you want to get to that point to at least experiment, don't you? But those things on their own are not what brings contentness.
Happiness.
And we were actually talking about educating children at school. Yes, we want to teach them on how to protect themselves, but also if we were teaching people from a young age about self-confidence, not just women, but men as well, they wouldn't be in this situation a lot of the time where they are sexting or getting into these relationships and being as vulnerable, because we do lack that inner confidence and that inner, again, it sounds a little bit cheesy, but for want of a better phrase, that self-love.
Confidence is the one word that underpins all of us.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes us either incredibly strong or the lack of makes us incredibly weak.
Mm-hmm.
And it applies, for me personally, everything. When I speak, I'm like you. I'm a huge studier of human behavior and interaction, and I read up as much as I possibly can on this stuff as well because I find it all fascinating. The confidence thing is key. I mean, I've had male friends of mine who've come out of relationships. They've broken up with their wives or their girlfriends after a long time, and they're like, "Oh, Will, I don't know what to do. I'm going to sign up to Bumble or Cringe or whatever, one of those dating apps." And I say, you know what it is, buddy? It's confidence. Every woman, and I speak to my female friends, and I go, it doesn't matter how ugly the guy is or he doesn't have a huge bank balance. If he comes in absolutely struggling with confidence, and there's a distinct difference between confidence and arrogance.
Yeah, there is. Yeah,
And it's because arrogance is usually it's fallible and it's usually underpinned by vulnerability.
Yeah.
Because it's trying to overcompensate
Mm-hmm.
for the lack of confidence. But the confidence of someone walking in makes all the difference, and every woman is magnetized to a man who is confident.
Yeah.
And forgive my generality. But equally, if we're doing something like a penetration test,
Sorry.
excuse me, enough about my weekend. So we get paid by companies to try and defeat their security covertly, to try and circumvent their security and get through. So it could be going through their front entrance, their main reception.
It's like innuendo bingo, isn't it?
It's just going horribly wrong now. It was going so well, Ellie. I'm so sorry. But yeah, we get paid to try and defeat their security. And when you're blagging your way through, it's like you have to have the confidence. You have to, it's like going into a party. You have to convince yourself and self-believe that you deserve to be there and you should be there. And it's all about you.
Yeah.
And even if you're faking it till you make it, it makes all the difference. And I used to have this great old gag, which I used to love playing at parties, and I used to play it with friends, where you'd basically go up to someone who you'd never met before, and you go, "Hi, how are you?" And you do this whole convincing routine that you know each other, that you know them, that you've met before. And because of our social politesse, people will rarely turn around and say, "Who the fuck are you? I've never seen you before in my life." People are too socially conditioned to not wanting to embarrass you or embarrass themselves because they may be forgetful.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing how long you can pursue that whole process if you've got the chutzpah to push it through. But confidence is everything. But it's also knowing where confidence doesn't move into arrogance. And confidence makes all the difference. It makes people warm to you, makes people happier, makes people feel secure, makes them feel confident. And in my business, confidence is absolutely key. You've got to know your shit and you've got to know what you're talking about, because you're going in quite often when people's lives have really gone quite chaotic and haywire and dark. And they're beseeching someone to try and help them out of it. And you may not necessarily help them out. And that's what you don't go in and say, "Ta-da, I will make everything better." I'm going to come in. I've dealt with these kind of things before, and I'm probably best placed to help you to try and get us out of this. But I'm going to be with you the whole way.
Yeah. It's quite funny. Confidence really is blinding when I look back at some of my ex-boyfriends, which was thankfully many moons ago, been with my husband for 18 years. But it wasn't just the fact that I was going out with some rather ugly men. It was the fact that I was completely deluded into believing that they were the sexiest things on the planet at the time, just because of their air of confidence.
Yeah, absolutely. But did they make you happy? That's the thing.
No, most of them treated me quite badly, actually.
Oh, no.
But you live and learn, don't you?
Yeah, we do live and learn. And I mean, but that confidence can get you through that first door. And I mean, it can get you some of the way. So you've got to be able to support it and back it up. But the confidence is really key. And I think that there was something I was thinking about while you were just talking there, about how the confidence is also reassuring for people. People, it's reassuring for you as well. And even if you are bluffing it to a certain extent when you're walking in the door, I do a lot of public speaking like you. I do a lot of seminars and particularly sort of industry events where I stand up. Am I crapping myself every time before I do them? Of course I am. And I hope I never, I hope I always will be.
Shows you care.
Yeah. And also it gets my game on, because I'm going, I've got to impress here. I've got to talk sense. I've got to hopefully deliver, and I've died. There have been a few that I've done that I've died on, and I've died in front of the audience. But, you learn from that and don't allow yourself to get knocked back. You just pick yourself up and say, "Hey, bad day. Everyone has a bad day."
I really love that. I think it was a Simon Sinek video that I watched in preparation for my first sort of really big public speaking engagement, because it's only 4 or 5 years ago where I was physically trembling at the prospect of doing a 30-second elevator pitch in front of a room full of 15 people. So it's quite an evolution, it's quite a process, but very much like you, I was completely shitting myself. The imposter syndrome had kicked in. But something Simon Sinek said was really useful, because yes, the fears are healthy, there's a fine line between excitement and fear. However, when it starts getting to the point where it's crippling you, you are actually making it more about you
Yeah.
than you are about the audience.
Yeah.
You're there to
Yeah.
serve the audience. So it's removing that ego as well. And it's also keeping in the forefront of your mind that unless there's an absolute knobber in the audience, which you may well have, the vast majority of people are interested in what you have to
Yeah.
say. They're there to learn. They want to see you do well. So get out of your own head
Yeah.
and just realise that typically if you've been asked to speak on a stage, because you're in a position where you have value to offer the other party. And I think the other point you made is really important, because we said fake it till you make it a few times, or be it until you become it.
Yeah.
And it's always great to hear stories of innovation, how people get their foot in the door.
Yeah.
But the point that I don't want to get missed, and I don't think it will have been missed, is the fact that, as you quite rightly said, you need to have the goods to back it up.
Yeah, of course.
Because it's almost like marketing versus sales versus
yeah.
delivery, isn't it? You can get the leads in, but then you need to convert the leads. But then if the product or service is complete shite,
Yeah.
then the whole thing's going to unravel very, very quickly.
Absolutely. But you have to have confidence in your product as well.
Yeah.
And if the product is you, and you're absolutely right, there will be knobbers in the audience. I've had them, and they will go, oh, and you see their little faces. And the problem is when you're talking to a big crowd of people, you'll have some people that are engaged, they're staring at you, and it's very easy to just engage with those. And the one thing I always try and do is just make sure I'm looking at the entire audience and just scanning everybody so nobody feels excluded. But you will get the odd knobber who's chatting in the back row, or, chatting to their mate or looking at their phone, and they're just not interested. Don't allow that to destroy your confidence. And believe in what you're delivering, believe in what you're doing, believe in what you're saying. Because if you don't, you will fall apart.
Yeah.
And you need to go up there with conviction and go, I am bringing value to these people. And you know what? Fuck them if they don't appreciate it. But you do need to be that way, and let them decide. It's a bit like when you host a party and you get a lot of people, you get them round, and you make everything perfect, and you get all the booze and you get all the food, and you decorate the place and make it look amazing. The one thing that so many people do is they spend their entire evening fretting, is everyone having a good time? Fuck them. They'll bring the good time to the party.
Yeah.
And if they don't, bye-bye.
Yeah. You know what?
You've done everything you possibly can.
Yeah, weddings are a prime example of that, aren't they?
I've had a couple.
Well, you're probably better placed than I am with this one. We got married in Antigua, but when we had the UK one, the sort of after party, if you like, a couple of weeks after we returned, I didn't get to see my husband once, because we're both dutifully doing the rounds. He was actually in the corner getting pissed with his mates, so we were just then arguing. But I'm going through as many people, some family members I've never even met before on Mark's side, and just trying to be the perfect hostess, if you like, because it's my wedding, which I appreciate you've got to do to an extent. But at the end of it, I was just so glad that we'd actually got married abroad, because I thought, what the fuck was the point in this? We're here to celebrate our love and our matrimony and our commitment to each other. And we haven't even seen each other, because you end up just trying to
appease everybody.
Appease everyone and be polite. But the other point that you made is, if you don't have confidence in yourself, how can you expect anyone else to have confidence with you? And again, it's not spoken about enough, because we're all sort of told it's okay not to be okay. Well, I would challenge that narrative.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Of course, we all have times where we don't feel okay. And yes, we want to normalise that, because we're not robots, and social media is very much just a highlight reel. But it's also saying, on the days where we don't feel okay, what are we doing about it? Or, sometimes you just have to absorb that negative energy, let it pass, and then the next day you start afresh. But this sort of sentiment that it's okay to not be okay is absolving yourself of any responsibility and any power over your own situation. And I've not met anyone that's successful, financially or otherwise, in any area of life, who has relinquished that power to a third party.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got to be not in a strange sociopathic way, although some of my exes
Is that how it
might.
came across?
Some of my exes will probably say I am sociopathic.
Is that a prerequisite?
Bit of sociopathy, if you can call it that. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think you need to be convinced. You have to, and you made a very valid point there. If you don't believe in yourself, how the hell is anybody else going to believe in you? So you've got to be very, very convinced, and that doesn't make us not, self-aware enough to go, you know what, we all have our failings. I need a cuddle as much as the next man. And and one thing I have with a very small, close group that I have of friends is, I will sign off a phone call and say, love you, buddy. And I will give them a big cuddle. And sometimes I will go around, just give them a big cuddle. And I will tell my friends how much I love them. And, we all need to hear that. We all need to hear that because, none of us are, if we didn't, then we would be a bit weird and we'd be a bit Jeffrey Dahmerish. But I think, the key thing here is you've got to actually believe in yourself. You've got to believe in yourself. If you don't believe in yourself, nobody else will. And you have to drive forward and recognize that what you do, and that modesty is fine, but modesty can also be hugely dangerous and hugely damaging. Fucking champion yourself. You are you. You bring something to the table. Some people like it, some people won't. Fuck the ones who don't.
You know what? It's almost what's needed to get you to a certain level is that whole cliche is not what's required to get you to the next again level. And I'm quite a humble person now, but had I displayed those attributes at the start, I wouldn't have been the tenacious ball breaker that was able to get noticed and get stood on stages. Or back when I worked in double glazing, I was promoted to management really quick. It's because I was backing myself. It's because I was loud. It's because I was in everyone's face. It was once met, never forgotten. And, arguably, and I don't agree with this, but that's why the naughty children in school tend to get the most attention. It's like the nice guy finishes last, and that's something that we obviously should look at changing. But don't be so scared to blow your own trumpet. Nobody else is going to do that. People make a career out of blowing out other people's candles, but that reflects more on them than you. And actually, when you do get to a certain level of success, as long as you can make sure that you're not arrogant, if you don't promote yourself and you don't tell people what you do, then arguably you're doing yourself a disservice. But not only that, you're doing a disservice to other people who may be getting value from your product or service or something that you have to offer, but they don't know you exist because you've not put yourself out there.
Yeah, it's really, that's all incredibly true, And I think also there is a lifeline of confidence, and it starts in early age as precociousness, and it can end up as arrogance. And you need to make sure that as that line is moving through your life journey and your life experiences, and as you develop and as you grow, that you ensure that that line doesn't drop into precociousness or into arrogance or rises into those particular spheres. And that's where the self-belief and self-awareness really comes in. And it's understanding that, do you know where that boundary is? And make sure you don't step into that, because the moment you do, that confidence gets completely decimated. That confidence gets undermined. That confidence gets seen through.
Yeah.
And then you are basically going to be in a very weak position.
Yeah.
So it's a bit like one of my other favorite sayings is, always be aware of the person who's the most quiet in the room, because that person probably has the most to say.
Yeah.
And I've had this when I've had young guys who've worked with me, and we go into a client meeting. And bless them, they'll be like trying to, like eager little foxes jumping up to try and sort of get their 5 cents worth in. And me reassuring them and saying, actually, you know what? If you come into that meeting and we finish the meeting and you haven't said a single word, you'll be remembered more than you would have if you've said something bone or stupid.
It's so true. It's that.
Or something which didn't actually contribute or elevate the conversation or the subject matter. If you walk away without saying anything, the client's going to respect you a lot more.
It's so powerful. And actually, this you can apply it to absolutely anything because I've listened to podcasts. I've probably spoken a bit more than I should have done this with some.
Me too.
Yeah, this probably isn't the best example where I've spoke disproportionately, but certain podcasts I've listened to where you're like, shut up to the host. They ask a question and they don't let the guest answer it. And it's incredibly frustrating. It's knowing when's your time to speak and when's your time to listen and learn from the specialists that you're bringing in. But do you notice with regards to the confidence moving into arrogance, a discrepancy between your I was going to say your layman clients compared to your celebrity clients because, or there's the wrong way to put it because all your clients are extremely successful because I'm sure you charge a hell of a lot of
I do, yes.
money. So that's going to rule out the vast majority of people. But do you notice a difference between the people who have not got a public profile and the ones who may typically be surrounded by an entourage, a lot of yes people? How does that impact the ego?
You know what? There's a fake ego with those that are in celebrity. It's a manufactured ego, whereas the business people who are worth billions there's a quiet confidence. There was one I had in New York, a lovely guy.
Who was that again?
Very good, Ellie. Nice try. Where I literally would go and meet with him in his Upper East Side, Madison Avenue offices. And at lunchtime, he'd go, right, I'm just going to get some lunch. And he'd walk down to one of the little burger stalls and just get a pretzel or a hot dog and eat it. This guy was worth $12 billion. And he'd just sit there with his, and I'd sit, nearby, just obviously keeping an eye on him, making sure I wasn't getting mugged or kidnapped. And he'd literally look at his phone and just, eat his hot dog quietly and then wander back into the office, but there was just this quiet confidence. And, you can pick up, I find that really magnetic when you meet someone who is really achieved stuff and is just the nicest person ever. I was with some lovely clients last night who cooked me dinner, and they're highly successful, really famous people, and they got their chef there, as you do, you're a chef, to cook me a really lovely dinner, and we just sat around like friends, and I don't know them that well, but genuinely lovely people, and I'm really looking forward to helping them out and working with them. Just very normal, nice people. And the thing is that very successful people can be very normal, but it's like celebrities. I mean, they're sort of Z-list level. Fucking pain in the arse, and I just won't touch them, unless there's a serious issue and they need some help. But the real A-listers, the real top level ones, they're lovely. They're really sweet. I remember, was it Jack Black? I hated all his movies. I was not a big fan. It was just one of those inherent, don't like his shows. Charmingest man on this planet. And the one thing that I would say certainly still prevails, and I've said this on a few podcasts, so forgive me, Ellie, is the ones you expect to be nice are generally horrible. And the ones you expect to be horrible are generally lovely.
Yeah. And you know what? Sometimes you just cannot call it. I will listen to guests before they come on, any previous interviews they've done. And I've had the most, or what I thought would be charismatic people booked in who have performed brilliantly. They've been in Flow
I'm sorry,
and other
Ellie,
interviews.
I tried my best today.
And then you meet them in person. And I don't know what it is. It's we touched on it right at the start of the podcast to kind of do a full closed loop on it, I suppose. It's about an energy, a connection.
Yeah.
Maybe someone's just having a bad day. Perhaps it's no reflection on you whatsoever. But, we can all have them. I look back at interviews I've done with other people and perhaps somebody's rubbed you up the wrong way, or it might not have been anything to do with the person actually interviewing. Like I just said, it might have been up all night, one of the kids or all three of the kids, or a party with a husband, or a property deal collapsing. And as much as we are the sort of people that will turn up and perform to the best of our abilities, there are definitely things that
can influence us. But I think also it's key to be able to, one thing in my industry is it doesn't matter. My girlfriend and I had a little bit of a row this morning, but I still gave her a kiss and walked out the door and have a lovely day, darling. And
that'll just wind her up more.
She's a fiery cracker. She's a fiery girl. Don't want to unleash her. That'd be nightmarish. But, you have to go to your job. And particularly in my industry and in many other industries, you got to park that shit. Whatever problem you've got, whatever nightmares are happening at home, put it to one side. Either don't turn up to work or park it.
Yeah.
I am so intolerant if someone comes to work for me and they go, oh, but, Kat ate my homework. Don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
Get out of here or crack on. Get on and do the job.
Well,
And this is the
so
problem with
right.
society now. It's
Yeah.
like, oh no. I mean, what is it? I heard about someone the other day. They had to take work off, they took some time off for a mental health day because they had their assessment and it didn't go as they wanted it to.
Yeah. We
And they
just shouldn't be pandering to that.
I'm sorry, I cannot, that person, when the zombie apocalypse hits, that's one of the first casualties,
Yeah.
you know?
But there's no excuses, really. I suppose it's the standard you set for your own life. It's that accountability. It's how you do anything, is how you do everything. We
Yeah.
spoke before we hit record. You asked if I had travelled down last night or this morning. Well, I could have got a 5:30, 5:45 train this morning and still made it here on time. But the trains aren't the most reliable. If I turn up on the morning and that's cancelled, then
Yeah.
I have got no physical means of being able to get here on time. If I
Exactly.
went back home and got in the car, the math doesn't add up. It takes significantly longer. So why would you leave that to chance? Why would you, for the vast majority of people, they would turn up on the morning and be like, shit, the train's cancelled. This is totally out of my control. And everyone in their family and their network will say, look, there's nothing you can do about it. These things happen. People
Yeah.
will understand. Well, here's the reality that no one's talking about. I wouldn't understand.
No.
If you'd not turned up today because you said that the bloody underground was on strike, I wouldn't expect that standard for myself, so I'm not going to expect it from you.
I wouldn't expect you to ever call me again.
Yeah,
Or take my call.
but that's the truth.
Quite
like,
right,
This
too.
is the absolute truth of life and business
Yeah.
that's not discussed because we've got an era of snowflakes, and that is a pretty controversial thing to say. But, travel down
shouldn't
the
be.
night before, do
It
what
shouldn't
you
be.
need to do to mitigate any risk. Any business is about mitigating risk,
Yeah.
isn't it? And
Yeah.
that extreme ownership. Well, we've already went over our time. I've got to finish with one final question because
Go.
it feels like we've been talking for 5 minutes. I did say at the start that I've got all these points written down that I wouldn't allude to once, and true to form, that's exactly what's happened. Perhaps so you could give us, seeing as you're not going to dish any celebrity names, how about a real practical tip that people can implement to improve their own personal safety?
I'm going to take this right back to where we started. Gut reaction, sixth sense, instinct. Call it what you like. You have it there for a very good reason. And whereas in our early days of living in caves and fighting saber-toothed tigers and mammoths, we had little else to rely on. These days, as information has advanced, as technology has improved, as we are deluged with information on a daily basis, our instinct can be confused by the various conflicting messages that are communicated to us. Push all of that fogginess to one side. Listen to your instinct. It may not always be right, but more often it will be right. And it is there to protect you and keep you safe.
Wow. Words of absolute wisdom. And also the other one that was a golden nugget from earlier that I'm going to take on board myself is not wearing headphones when you're out and about and
Correct.
walking on your own.
Absolutely. You remove one of your key senses. You
Mhm.
have smell, taste, hearing, and whatever the other one was. Can't remember.
Touch.
Touch. Yeah, that brings back bad memories. No. You're removing one of your inherent senses
Yeah.
and forewarning of any potential danger and trouble.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wear them when you're static, in a car, on a tube, on a train, somewhere where you don't have to watch your six.
Wow. Love that. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure. I
I've
need to
loved
bring
this,
you back
Ellie.
for round 2 because
Thank
it's
you.
gone so quick, hasn't
I
it?
know. What happened? Was that about 20 minutes?
It's about 20 minutes, about an hour and 40. It's
Wow.
been an absolute pleasure. You're a superstar. You did not disappoint. Thank you for coming on the
thank
On a
you so
Mission
much.
podcast.
I've really enjoyed it. Thank you, Ellie.
Thanks, Will. You have to go to war with yourself.
Welcome
To the On a Mission.
On a Mission.
the On a Mission podcast.
You've got one of the best jobs in the world.
I have to say, you've had some really astounding guests.
You're genuinely a force for good.
You are the truth warrior.